welcome back to my channel. So to thank you all for 20,000 subscribers, which is pretty sick, I'm gonna do what a lot of other World of Warcraft YouTubers have done previously, which is to tell you guys my World of Warcraft story. I've tried to make it not too long and my memory is pretty shit, but I'm gonna try my best anyways. I still remember the first time I got introduced to World of Warcraft. It was back in vanilla when my godfather tried to get me to play, showing me different zones and things to do in the World of Warcraft. I was not interested at all. I was hooked on my Nintendo 64 and my Game Boy, and I thought World of Warcraft looked lame. But only 3 years later I was going to get a challenge from my mates that would change my life. In college, most of my mates were raving about this game called World of Warcraft, and they knew I was interested in games, so they would want me to try it out. I still had my previous experience about the game stuck in my head, so I was like, nah, maybe one day, but I kept postponing playing it. Until one day they challenged me, saying that I would not be able to get to level 80, which was during Wrath of the Lich King, without their help. Me being stubborn AF decided that I was going to play this game and I was going to prove them wrong. I got a trial account and made a Night Elf Druid called Exotica because my mate at that time had a paladin called Exotic and I had a tiny crush on him, which was super lame. I was 16 years old and the closest thing I ever got to an MMORPG was playing Habbo Hotel and 2 minutes of RuneScape. It was an amazing first experience. Teldrassil and Dionysus were so beautiful and I always had a love for elves because of The Legend of Zelda. I would quest a bit through Teldrassil until I quickly decided to actually buy the game, so I went and got my mother's bank card and bought it. Not long after that, my mates would invite me to their guild and I was apparently playing on the low populated realm Vash on Alliance EU. And I quickly started talking to some of the people in the guild there as they were progressing through Icecrow Citadel, even though I had no idea what that meant at the time. Eventually, I would find myself being summoned to Stormwind City and I was overwhelmed. Overwhelmed by this huge city with a growing community of people. People would stand outside the auction house and actually have conversations with each other in Say and not in Whisper. It was such a great city, and I was told in guild chat that I could continue questing in Elven Forest unless I wanted to go back to Dionysus. I decided to stay because I already realized how big the world of Astaroth was, and I would venture deeper into Elven Forest. This was also when my first experience with higher level mobs started. I went into Red Ridge Mountains as level 10 and I could not understand why the mobs would kill me instantly, and why some of them had a question mark level instead of their actual level. I quickly got scared and went back to Elven Forest, where I met a paladin who would realize I was a new player, and he would give me 100 gold. I felt so rich. I'd never seen 100 gold before and I was amazed about how nice people were. I truly felt that I was making friends and we are still in contact to this day, even 6 or 7 years later. I probably didn't join a dungeon until level 50 or so. I had no idea they even existed. I would also need on everything and I was wearing a big mix of agility and intellect gear with probably some white gear pieces here and there, until a fellow guildie told me that a boomkin had to use intellect gear. Because I kept needing on everything, I kept getting kicked from groups. I didn't understand why, because they were upgrades for me. I also wasn't playing with a mouse, only a mousepad on my really shitty Toshiba laptop, and I remember having to pierce the water to get down into the Sunkel Temple and release. So I ended up being kicked and I think I spent 40 minutes trying to get to my body, until I eventually had to take rest sickness to be able to rest. I loved exploring Astaroth. I would take boats, I would run and I would sneak on Horde Zeppelins to get from one point to another, but there was one event in Darkshore I would never forget. I jumped off the boat at Darkshore and my chat kept being spammed with "This city is under attack." I did not understand what that meant at all until I saw a horde of level ? Players raging through, killing everything they could see. I logged off WoW and didn't log back on until the day after. I was so scared. This also resulted in me being too scared to join Battleground, so I didn't join a Battleground until I reached max level. So the day finally came that I managed to reach level cap, aka level 80, and I got so many congratulations in guild chat and it felt absolutely great. Great being able to run through max level dungeons and difficulties, but still overwhelming because people started to ask me about raiding. I could never bear the thought about raiding and having so many people rely on me. Fast forward to the Cataclysm launch, I was so hyped. This was the first World of Warcraft launch I had ever witnessed, and everyone around me was so excited. The cinematic to Cataclysm was so cool, and seeing the world that I had just explored as a new player got destroyed by Deathwing was terrifying, but also meant that I could re-explore the world. Like Thousand Needles and the coastlines were flooded, and they introduced new leveling zones. I had re-rolled a hunter now, and I took my time questing through Cataclysm, enjoying all the zones and the dungeons, and when I got to level 85, I decided to join a horde guild on Vash, and I faction transferred. This was also the time that my mother caught me using her bank account as a way to play WoW, and she went into a rage. But I managed to explain to her that it was a way for me to play and spend time with my friends, and she eventually agreed to letting me use her bank account for the game time, since I was still living at home, attending school, and I wasn't working. A few other friends of mine were raiding in a guild called Fjord on Horde Vash, and they wanted me to join their guild. I figured that it wouldn't hurt, and the rest of the guild would quickly understand that I was a girl. They insisted I should join them killing Shannocks in Firelands, and I was absolutely terrified. I had never set foot in a raid, and all I could see was lag, fire, and me being caught in Shannocks' traps. We killed them eventually, and they offered me a raiding spot even though I was absolutely horrible. I do appreciate them giving me a chance to start raiding to this day, even though I know it was most likely because I was a girl. We would continue getting through Firelands, and we killed Alice Racer. I remember the mount dropped, and I won the role, and everyone got so angry. I was just a new noob they had to carry. I didn't really care because that sparked my love for mounts and made me want to collect them. Not long after, I started farming for Timeless Proto-Drake. I was sitting in Storm Peaks for hours upon hours waiting and waiting, until one day after around 100 hours camping, I would say enough is enough and log out. I would head off to school, but something inside me felt weird, so I decided to ditch school, go home and log on WoW, and there, right in front of me, was the time lost Proto-Drake. I was so happy. And lo and behold, only a few months later, the same thing happened with Aeonax and the Phosphorescent Stone Drake. And I had now two of the most rarest mounts in the game, and a guild I was raiding with. It felt great. We managed to clear Heroic up until Ragnaros when Dragon's Soul was launched, and my guild was struggling. I was so bad, but I tried my best. We would clear it on normal, but Heroic was really hard. We had killed 4 Heroic when the Guildmaster stole all the guild loot and items and disbanded the guild. I was devastated I had to find a new home, but quickly I found another guild that would run me through the rest of the bosses in Dragon's Soul, where I pretty much got boosted, even though I most likely was boosted all the way through Firelands as well. Around this time my account got hacked, but luckily they didn't change the password and I got my account back very quickly. It turns out they had been farming Firelands trash with my hunter, and the Game Master let me keep the 10,000 gold they had farmed. Wow, I had never had 10,000 gold before, and I'd started looking into gold farming. I was the best geared hunter on Vash at that time, and I would run through Firelands trash, farming the bind on equipped items and the raw gold I could vendor. I was now gold farming. I'd gotten a taste for gaining more and more gold that I couldn't stop. It quickly turned into me doing lots of research for new methods, and I was now leveling professions on all my tools that I would craft true gold and dark mood trinkets to sell on the auction house. Mists of Pandaria came out and I leveled up my hunter, but quickly lost interest in it. I figured I could pick up my paladin that I had leveled to 85 a couple months back called Dinapus, and I fell in love with the Retribution spec. I have been maining Retribution Paladin ever since that day. I quickly realized I was doing better as a Retribution Paladin than on my hunter, and I decided to reroll. I would play casually during the start of Mists of Pandaria. I would run through normal Mogushan and Heart of Fear with friends, but mostly I would farm gold. I would spend hours farming ghost iron ore and trillium, and would craft belt buckles and living steel. This was when I made my first 1,000,000 gold. It felt weird having to send your gold over to another character because it couldn't hold more gold, but it felt so good. And fast forward to Siege of Orgrimmar, I decided I wanted to try and raid again, but I wanted to see if I could raid without telling them I was a girl because of my previous experiences. I wanted to do this on my own. I joined a pug through trade chat, and we would actually clear all of Siege of Orgrimmar on normal and 11 bosses on heroic. It felt amazing, and I managed to build up enough courage to start applying for guilds. I kept getting declined sadly, but I started talking to this girl on Twitch.tv called Kinuli. She would introduce me to streaming, and we would stream together, doing all raids with our viewers and just talk about everything and nothing for hours. She told me she had a raiding guild on Sylvanas Alliance that I could trial for, and my server and faction changed. This guild was called Terras Valesh, and they wanted to trial me. I actually had some extra progress than what they had at this time. I think they had killed 9 bosses, and I felt like I had an advantage and that people actually saw me as a good player for once. I could finally carry my own weight in a guild, and I was doing really good. We had another Retribution paladin in my raid team called Dragsoul, and we used to fight with each other trying to get the best trinkets before the other. We both became raiders, and we would have a really good time in Terras Valesh, where I finally felt like I had found a home. After a while, my happiness took a turn around for the worse. My raid team was going to be disbanded because we struggled with attendance, and I was heartbroken. I was yet again without a home, and I felt this strong need to be a part of a team. This was when my World PvP period started. I took a break from raiding, but I saw a player advertising for their World PvP guild in trade chat. I had only heard about World PvP from vanilla and TBC players, and I had no idea it was still a thing. Turns out, Sylvanas and Outland on EU was huge when it came to World PvP guilds. I joined their World PvP guild, started doing big scale World PvP fights, and I was having so much fun. I was also a really good gear rep paladin, and other World PvP guilds started to notice because they had difficulties killing me. This guild didn't last long. They quickly became paranoid, and because of my kind and friendly nature, and the fact that we had a spy in our guild that would give information to the other faction's World PvP guild, Vengeful Dawn, they thought that the spy was me. They started freezing me out, not inviting me to events, and eventually guild kicking me. I found out later who the spy was, and it was pretty hilarious how they came with their tails between their legs apologizing to me. Because I got kicked, I felt a really strong vendetta against the guild, and I was offered a spot in the enemy guild, Vengeful Dawn, on Horde. I quickly faction transferred over to Horde, and I would kill every single one of my previous guildmates, as well as other bigger world scale PvP guilds. Apparently, my alliance guild wasn't big in experience at all. I hadn't even seen what World PvP really was. It was great. I still remember being 20 members against another alliance guild that decided to double the numbers and bring Russians, and we still defeated them. I would now also pick Holy Paladin in World PvP, since we lacked healers from time to time, and I actually enjoyed it. But this guild also had its drama, so eventually after half a year I decided that this wasn't the thing for me, and I left. And oh boy, I still get harassed to this day from this guild from leaving, even though it has been 3 years. I was pretty shaken up, and I got a lot of threats and whispers in general, from people being angry that I left, or people saying they were glad I left because I was just an attention whore. The only thing I did wrong apparently was being nice and being social. I went back to Alliance, and now Siege of Orgrimmar had a mythic level, so I started raiding again in a new guild I can't remember the name of. I took a break until Warlords of Draenor came, and I would join Perplexity on Alliance Sylvanas as a raider there during Highmole. I also spent a lot of time gold farming now, especially skinning the tundras in Shadowmoon Valley and making drums. I was making bank from this, which I again put to use for the guild. We cleared 4 mythic in Highmole until Blackrook Foundry came out, and I was in Blackrook Foundry during heroic and some mythic progression. We didn't get along that well, so I decided it was time to call the quits. I left the guild and decided to apply to Unknown Entity on the same server. I got accepted as a trial, and after me came several people that I used to raid with from Perplexity, and Perplexity sadly disbanded. We would go through Hellfire Citadel, and it was such a good guild. People were friendly, the officers were serious and didn't take any shit. They would appreciate players and help them become better, and this is what truly made me progress as a player. I had some rough periods during this raid, but I always came back wanting to stay in the guild. And now during Nighthold, I'm still playing with Unknown Entity. Such a great bunch of players. You might have seen players come and go, people passing and failing the trial, but every single one of them are saying that it is such a great guild to be in. I've been in Unknown Entity for 2 years now, and I can truly say that I finally found my home in this game, even though it took me 3.5 expansions to find them.